All right, so a review of Chapter 1, which is your introduction to JavaScript. And so a lot of this, some of that anyway, was kind of a repeat from CIS 130, and some of it might have been a repeat from CIS 120, so we'll just go over the JavaScript portion of the chapter. And to do that, I'm going to start with my basic HTML page. So maybe I should call this my first JavaScript. So let's go over some of the concepts that were covered in the chapter. And I guess the first thing that we need to start off with is how to put JavaScript into our document. So that is done with a script tag. So I'll do an open and closing script. Now, used to be we would have to say what type this is, that its type equals JavaScript, but with the advent of HTML5, the default is JavaScript, so all we need is the tag that says script. And it's assumed, the browser assumes the default, which is JavaScript. And in fact, that's what we're doing, so we're in good shape. All right, so the very first thing we do is always print out our document, or our hello world. And to do that in JavaScript, we do document.write, and then our string, which is hello world. And then we end our JavaScript with a semicolon. Now, semicolons are optional here, but I highly recommend you get into the habit of it, and it's just going to be better for you in the long run. So let me just say that semicolons, therefore, are mandatory. Okay, great. So now if we save this, let's just get this started. We're going to save, and then we want to view it in our browser. So if I right-click and I choose, this is Atom, by the way. I don't know if you've used Atom in the past, but it's better than Notepad++, which you had to do if you had me for CIS 130. So show and explore, and that's going to show us in the Explorer window, and then we'll open it and see what we get. It opened up on the other screen, so I'll pull that down for you. Eventually, there it is. And in fact, we have our hello world, so that's very exciting. Okay, so next, let's see what else we can do. Let's do variables. So in fact, with JavaScript, like any other language, you can create a variable. And to create a variable, we're going to use the word var, V-A-R, which defines a variable. And I'm going to call this my name. Now, a couple of things here. Var is optional, but I highly recommend you get into the habit of it because there's reasons why you would or would not leave it off in the future. And so good practice in the short run until we understand scope and all of that is just to go ahead and put in the var. So again, semicolon at the end of this. Now, notice that I didn't define the data type. I don't have to define the data type. JavaScript is what's called a loose typed language. It's going to assume, it's going to try and make that assumption as the code gets rendered as to what's inside of it. So at this time, I could, if I want to, give it a value, or I don't have to. But I'm going to give it a value, give it my name, give it a string, and I'm assuming that a lot of this variables and so forth is that you've had 120, and so you know what a variable is, and initializing your variables and data types and that sort of thing, so I'm kind of glossing over that at the moment. And so then I guess the next thing is I need to, or I would like to, print out document.write, hello, and space, and then concatenating or joining my string from my variable. So I'll put hello, my name, and then the semicolon. So let's look at our work and see how we're doing so far. So, oops, we don't need that anymore. Ideally then I should have, and there it is, hello world and hello Kirsten. All right, well, that's not formatted very nicely. It turns out that in JavaScript, and this is what kind of throws people off when they first get started with JavaScript, is that I can also put in the HTML tags. Okay, I don't need your help there, Adam. You didn't help me quite the way I was hoping for. So let's see. Let's fix what Adam tried to help me with. Okay, so here we go. So I want to physically write to the browser my paragraph tag. So in my string, I'm also writing my tags, any of my elements. So anything that you can normally do in HTML, you can write in JavaScript in your string. So now hello world should be a paragraph, and I'll do the same thing here. P, don't help me, it did. Okay, sometimes code helps you and sometimes it doesn't. There we go. And then we need to not have our closing, and then maybe we'll do join the string and the ending tag. So now we've joined a opening We've joined our variable in a concatenation with our opening and closing p tag. And remember that DocumentRight is just like any kind of print lines you've done before. It's just printing exactly what's inside the string, or in our case in the concatenated string, and plugging in the variables. So nothing too earth-shattering there, except for the fact that now we get to add our elements. And so let's see if I can just do it that way. There we go. And sure enough, it added the p tags. So anything that you normally write in HTML, you can put inside your DocumentRight string. And recognize that just like anything we've done before, every line is rendered line by line, and whatever line is currently being hit, so DocumentRight, that line gets executed and then the next line runs. So these are just writing line by line the code that it's encountering as it renders it in the browser. Okay, so what else can we do? Let's create an image. That should look familiar. So image source equals, and it looks like in this particular folder I have a stitch, stitch mad.png. Okay, alt equals mad stitch. Okay. And just an aside, by the way, in case it wasn't otherwise notated or you missed it in the chapter, JavaScript is case sensitive. So our variables are case sensitive. JavaScript would not recognize this word because the variable name and this name are not the same. So here no value has been given to my name. That would render an error. Okay, so we'll do that. Okay, so now we should have an image, and let's check out our image. And sure enough, there's Stitch. That's lovely. Okay, so now what are we going to do with that image? Why are you giving me an image? Well, because I want to introduce to you the idea of events. And so the browser window is constantly looking for things to happen, things that the user might interact with, which is what makes JavaScript so cool, is the fact that it's interactive without having to send data back to the server, and then the server sends the new data back to the client or to the browser. The browser can do it all by itself without sending any packets back and forth to the server. So that's a lot of words. Let's see what that means. Okay, so let's create, let's see, on top of this, let's create a p tag. Now noticing I'm just doing this in normal HTML, and we're going to say click here. Click, I got to spell click right, click here. Okay, and what we want to do is if this paragraph hears an event on click. In other words, the window's going to listen for this p tag, and if this p tag gets clicked, there it is, then do something JavaScripty. And so let's have an alert message come up. So we use alert, and we'll say, let me do a single quote, hello, okay. Why did you do a single quote? And what's going on here? All right, so when we click on this p tag, anything that's in this p tag, this method is going to run. It's an alert box that's going to print up hello. And just like we've done before in the past, or I'm sure you've seen in the past, when you're creating a string within a string, you need to make sure that the outer string is the same. So my outer string is the double quotes, and my inner string needs to be a different type of quote, the single quote. The reasoning for that is if I've made this a double quote, then JavaScript would read this as here's the beginning, here's the end, and oops, what's all this other stuff dangling here? It doesn't know what to do with it. So we use the single quote. And so now when we click on click here, we should get this alert box. So let's try that. So we get, we refresh the page and we click here and we get an alert box. So our window responded to an event. Our window was listening for things to happen, and when the P got clicked, the window said, oh, I know what to do when that P gets clicked. I need to put up an alert box. So fantastic. Let's take this another step further. Okay, we're going to use something called getElementById. And I'm just going to type it in, and then we're going to figure out what it means. All right, so I'm going to give my image tag an ID. ID equals Stitch. Now, if you recall from HTML class, ID is only allowed to be given to one element. So there's only one element on my page that should have an ID of Stitch. And then I could have lots of elements that have the same class name, but we agreed that ID is unique, if you recall. Now here's where this comes into play, and now you'll start to see why this is so kind of aha, is when we get to the JavaScript stuff. So let's go back to our onClick. I'm going to get rid of our alert. Well, I'm going to keep our alert in there. And what I'm going to do instead is, instead of creating a hello box, we're going to do, let me just type it out, get. Now remember, this is case sensitive. Okay, element by ID, and then that's a method, and we put in the name of the method, which the ID, which is Stitch, and I'll backtrack here a minute. .src. Okay, so what I've done with get element by ID, this method gives you the ability to get a hook to grab onto another element that's within this document. So in this case, there's an element that has an ID, get element by ID, go grab the element that has an ID of Stitch. So grab this element, and now that you have it in your clutches, I want you to get the source from that. So in this case, we're going to be able to get more properties from it, but in this case, we're just getting the source. So in other words, we're returning what is the source value of this image, and we're going to get that when we click on this onClick. Let's just run that and see how that works. Refresh the page and click here, so it's going to grab the source and give us that, sure enough. Now granted, it gave us the entire path, but we can finagle that as we move along. But the bottom line is, it did give us the source file, the source property of that image. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so let's take that a step further. Now I'm going to start another paragraph tag. And let me just make the tag first. Let's see, and we're going to say change image. Okay, so now let's do another onClick. So we've got another events on. So when this P tag gets clicked, do something different. Okay, and here inside the double quotes is the JavaScript that we want to have run when this P tag gets clicked. So let's get that element by ID Stitch. Let's get that element again. So now we're getting a hold on that, but this time, instead of getting the value of source, let's set it. So again, single quotes, and I have a image in there called Stitch Suite, S-T-I-T-C-H, suite.png. Okay, so now when we click our P tag, get element by ID says, go grab the element that has an ID of Stitch and change the source to a different image. So in essence, it's dynamically changing this property. Without having to reload the page or send packets back to the server, it should just change the image. So let's see if that works. So click here, that gives me the source, yep. And now when we click on change image, it in fact changed the image of that file. So get element by ID is very, very helpful, and we'll be able to do a lot of really cool things with it. So that is why we had stressed so much in HTML class that an element can only have a single ID. Okay, so what can we do next? Well, let's see. Just like our CSS pages, we might want to share code amongst some JavaScript code amongst all of our pages. So there's nothing wrong with putting a script tag in this page if this page is the only place in which we're going to be running this JavaScript. But what if we wanted to create a footer that spanned across all of our pages? So what we can do is, let's see, we're going to create a link to our JavaScript page. So we're going to write script, source equals, and we'll call it scripts.js. So it's very similar to what we did in with our CSS page. The syntax is a little different. We're using the word script and source instead. Sometimes it gets a little confusing, but this is what we want to do. And now we need to create that page that has our JavaScript. So I'm going to create a new page, new file. I'm going to call it scripts.js, just like I said I was going to do. And here let's do something like, now recognize, just like our CSS page, that no HTML goes on this page, no CSS goes on this page, only valid JavaScript goes on this page. So I think I'll just do something simple for now, and I'll say document.write, and we're going to create a footer element. So remember, I can put HTML tags in my string, and it'll actually write out that HTML on my document as it renders this line and creates a footer, an HTML footer. Thank you for visiting my page. Okay, and then we should end that footer in good HTML. And then we need to end our JavaScript with our semicolon. So again, everything gets rendered in the order it's read. So first these lines of code will be read, then the image will be rendered, and then our script tag will be rendered, which is the JavaScript file that should write this footer to our page. So let's see if that works. Assuming everything is saved, I'm not sure I did. Yep, okay, and now after we run this, we are missing our footer. So I did something wrong. Let's see what we missed. Script source, oh, I think I named one scripts and one script. Oh yes, that would definitely be a problem. So now let's run it again and see what happens. Okay, there it is. So there is our, in order of being rendered on the page, everything gets displayed one after the other, and we have a script tag that's linked to our page. So that is the beginning of chapter 1. This is the beginning of our first JavaScript page.